Hello and welcome to the Politics of Peterborough, the podcast where I chat with the people who have been elected to make decisions about our city and those who try to influence them. I'm your host, Dave Adcock. If you have any suggestions as to who you'd like to listen to on a future episode of the podcast, or have any questions you'd like to put to my guests, you can get in touch via Facebook or X at politicspboro, or send an email to politics.peterborough@hotmail.com. On with the show. My guest for this episode got into politics early. By the age of 14, she'd already joined the Labour Party, and at 17 was out canvassing with local candidates. By 18, before she'd sat her A-levels, she was elected as a councillor for Fletton and Woodstone Ward, becoming Peterborough's youngest ever councillor. Since then, she served on the Children and Young People Scrutiny and Licensing Committees, and championed raising awareness of kidney disease through Kidney Research UK. Then, just 1 year and 3 days after being elected, she took the decision to resign from the Labour group on the council, citing bullying, marginalisation and claims of anti-Semitism which went unaddressed. Councillor Daisy Blakemore-Creedon, welcome to the Politics of Peterborough.
Well, thank you for having me.
There's an awful lot to unpack from that introduction, but let's start back at the beginning. What was it that first stoked your passion for politics?
There was a protest I went on, and it was an end austerity protest. And I was stood there amongst thousands of people and thought, actually, how can I make a real difference? And after a few days of reflection, I got in contact with the local Labour Party and decided to get involved. And that turned out to be going to lots of canvassing sessions as the local elections were coming up. And I enjoyed it. It was nice to be a part of something which you truly believed in.
And so what was it about specifically Labour that drew you to them as opposed to the Greens or Lib Dems?
I mean, I come from a very socialist-rooted family, but it got to a point where when I started to get political, and I used to watch Question Time at the age of 12, God knows why, and they decided to have that conversation with me and said, Daisy, if you want to go into politics, we do not want to indoctrinate you, and you need to make a decision for yourself. So I got handed Marxism books, conservatism books, liberalism, and I started doing research into all political ideologies, and I was kind of drawn into Marxism and socialism, and that kind of led me into the Labour Party.
And so how do you go from party activist to running as a candidate at the age of 18?
Well, that was kind of an accident. So I was due to be a paper candidate because I was due to go to university at that time. And they had a candidate drop out quite last minute. And I was asked, would I be willing to step into that role? And I said, you're going to have to give me a few days to consider it and how I can balance it whilst doing A-levels. And it came to a conclusion where I said, look, I'm willing to do this, but I want to do a proper campaign. I want to be out there knocking on doors, because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to win.
You stood against incumbent and former guest on this podcast, Andy Coles. How confident at that time were you that you could potentially win the seat?
Not confident at all, due to a lot of the group members saying, you do realise who you're up against. Andy Coles is very well known in the ward, but also very well known across Peterborough. And so I said, sure, okay, but I'm still going to go out there and put up a good fight.
May the 3rd comes around, election night, and the result comes in that you've won. What were your initial feelings as soon as you heard that?
I was very shocked by it, but I wasn't overly shocked because when the votes started coming in, they were piling on for Labour. And I think me and Andy had a little discussion and thought, gosh, Daisy, you've won. And I was very shocked because my plans were to go to university because I thought, no, I'm not going to, I've been told I've got no chance of winning tonight. And then here I am as an elected councillor by the end of the night.
Now, your bio on X is that girl that got elected as the UK's youngest councillor. Does that suggest that you wear your age as a badge of pride rather than it being a topic that you're fed up of people raising?
Yeah, of course it's a badge of pride. I think it encourages more young people to go into politics, and which I am seeing, is a lot of young people reach out to me saying, how can I get involved? How can I look to stand as a councillor within Peterborough and even nationally getting in contact? And it's very pleasing to hear that I'm aspiring the next generation to go into politics.
In your first few months in the role, did it meet your expectations? What expectations did you have going into that?
I thought I could make radical change super fast and super quick, and that's not what I got into. That I came to a realisation that, okay, you can make change, but it takes time and effort, not radical quick change.
What about the party politics side of stuff? Did you get as much autonomy on how you vote on issues as you had expected to when you were elected?
No, party whips, they're a nightmare. I wasn't too aware of how much party whips influence local politics, but because I followed national politics quite frequently, I was aware of party whips and how they influence parliamentary votes. But I actually think they actually have more of an influence in local government than national government.
Now, almost a year to the day of your election, you announced your resignation from the Labour group. In your announcement, you stated that you'd been on the end of bullying and marginalisation within the group. Without needing to name any names, are you able to talk us through some specific examples of what you experienced?
Yeah, so it was quite a surprise. Well, I say surprise. It was sad and disappointing that I had to resign. And due to things like bullying, and the bullying I experienced was over calling for CCTV in taxis. Again, yes, it was a whipped vote against CCTV in taxis. And I can say, yes, I was naive and went with that whipped vote. But afterwards, I came to a conclusion and thought, actually, I can't sleep at night knowing that I've voted against CCTV in taxis. And it got to a point where I started posting on social media about incidents that have occurred in taxis. And Labour councillors started picking up on this. And then I was accused of targeting Asian Labour councillors for posting about CCTV in taxis. And then Labour Party supporters started posting anti-Semitism posts linking me to Benjamin Netanyahu and saying I'm on the government payroll for Israel. And I mean, I went to the party, the regional party and national party, to ask for safeguarding support, and no safeguarding support was offered. And it came to a point where it started to get more intense and more intense, and it felt as though they was trying to silence me. So I thought, actually, I'm going to leave and I will have a bigger voice whilst I'm no longer in this party.
At what point in your year that you were in the Labour group did you begin to have doubts about your position? Was it quite late on, or was it partway through?
I think it was probably about partway through, and you could kind of see how people operate, and you expect everyone to go into politics to want change and make a difference. But when you get knee deep into politics, you actually realise that not everyone's in it for that. Some people are in it for themselves, and some people like power. I mean, I've never come across so many narcissistic attitudes and egos, and I just couldn't be part of a group that had that sort of mentality.
You mentioned also, alongside the bullying and the anti-Semitism, that there was marginalisation. Did you find that you were being left out of meetings and things like that?
I mean, to begin with, I questioned myself in the group because I was young, and then I kind of found my voice. And once I found my voice, I don't think people liked that I found my voice. I think they would have rather me sat there, be quiet, follow the party whip, and don't ask questions. And that's something I wasn't willing to do. And once I found my voice, then came the marginalisation, then came the bullying, and then came the anti-Semitism. So it's the whole idea around silencing which really got me.
Do you think things would have been different for you if you were a 40-year-old man, but with the same amount of political experience?
No, I think it would have been the same. Because if you're willing to ask the questions that I was asking, I think you would have been shut down, no matter your age, no matter your gender.
Going all the way back to the start of 2023, over a year before you were elected, you were out canvassing alongside members of the Labour group. You were doing that on a regular basis. Did you ever see anything that, now you look back on it, potentially should have raised concerns?
For sure. There was one time where I heard someone in the street say, "I hate all Jews." And I instantly thought, did I just hear that? And I went back and had a conversation with someone and said, "Did you hear that too?" And they was like, "Yeah." And I thought, okay, great. They've heard it. They're going to raise the issue. And I never heard anything since. And as someone who has Jewish heritage, I thought, oh my gosh, what have I just heard? And now, this present moment, I wish I reported it back again. But I was expecting someone else to raise it.
So was that just a member of the public? Or was
No.
that? Oh, so that was a Labour member?
Yes.
When I spoke with Councillor Howard after he'd initially left the Conservative group, he said there wasn't a toxic culture within the Conservative group, but there were toxic individuals. Do you think, in your opinion, that's a similar situation within the Labour group, or is it a wider spread problem?
I think it was a wider spread problem because I think people were too scared to speak up because they were afraid to lose votes.
As late as the 26th of April this year, which is just a week before you resigned, you were still canvassing for Anna Smith in her efforts to become Combined Authority Mayor. At what point did you make the decision to leave, and was there a specific event that pushed you to make that decision?
Well, there was an incident on... The reason I left was because I was reporting the marginalisation, the silence and the anti-Semitism to the safeguarding team at Labour, and nothing was being done about it, and it got worse and worse, and it got to a point where I actually came to a realisation where I thought, no, maybe not being part of this group is the best decision for myself, for me, my mental health, and for my residents too. And yes, I was supporting Anna, and there's good, there's bad, there's evil in every political party, but it didn't take away that I still had Labour morals. I just wasn't willing to be part of a group which is willing to silence people when they start asking the hard questions.
Now, you said you went to the safeguarding group. Is that a national part of Labour? So, and you weren't getting any responses from those?
I was getting responses, but they were nothing responses.
So do you feel that this is a wider problem than just the local Labour group? It's a Labour Party problem?
Completely.
Do you wish you'd left the group sooner?
No, because the longer I stayed in there, if I left sooner, I don't think I would be campaigning for what I'm campaigning for now. And the longer I stayed in there, I saw more and more what the individuals and what the party were like.
With what you know now and what's happened to you over the last 18 months, going back to you as an individual where they had asked you to stand as a candidate, do you think you would have made a different decision knowing then what you know now?
That's a very difficult question. I don't think I would have stood for Labour, and I think I would have waited a few years before I stood, and perhaps stood as an independent, got myself known around the community and stood independently in the ward.
Speaking of your ward, have you managed to continue a working relationship with Councillor Dawson since your departure from Labour?
Well, I would say yes, and it has been a good working relationship. But there was an incident over the summer where he invited me to his house for an event, and he also invited Labour members. And I turned up to his house, and I was parked outside and thought, why am I the only car parked outside? As far as I'm aware, there was supposed to be around 100 people attending this do at Alan's house. And I went into Alan's house and he said, the Labour Party have cancelled the event. And I said, why? And they said, because I've invited you here. And he said, I'm a strong, principled man. You're my friend. I'm going to have you here. And I was very appreciative of that. But then, this morning, I was on a phone call with Alan after talking to him within the week, asking about would he like to do award surgery with me. And he's now come back to me and said, due to recent events, I think it's not a good idea that we have a working relationship at the moment, which I understand, but I think we all need to, as councillors, especially when you're both representing the same ward, you need to work together for the best interests of your residents, despite party politics.
Now, there are currently 12 councillors, yourself included, sitting on the council who are no longer with the party they stood for at the last election. Between them, they've received just under 12,000 votes. Critics say that leaving mid-term breaks the trust of voters who chose you on a Labour ticket. How do you respond to that?
I understand that completely. However, I did offer to trigger a by-election when I left Labour, and a lot of residents came to me in confidence and said, we still want you as our local councillor. You're the only councillor we see out doing stuff. You're the only councillor that we feel as though is truly trying to represent us as best as you can. And so I believe that despite, you never know, I might not get re-elected, but I always will fight in the best interest of my ward.
Do you feel that there's an argument to be made where politicians who leave the party they were elected for should face an automatic by-election to take that out of the hands of making that decision?
I think it depends on how the public react. And if the public say you're a good councillor and we still want you to represent the ward, then I think deflecting is okay. But a by-election does cost the taxpayer. And to automatically do that, knowing that you're going to get re-elected or potentially get re-elected, then I don't think that's fair on a taxpayer to trigger a by-election.
Do you think we'd see more councillors go independent before the next election in 8 months' time?
I think so, yes. And I think we might see an increase of independent MPs across the country.
Since leaving the Labour Party, you've been vocal in your criticism not only of the local Labour group, but also Peterborough MP Andrew Pakes and Labour government figures. You once talked about having, and you did earlier, about having Labour morals and principles. Would you say that's still the case?
Yeah, despite probably being perceived as far right now for talking about how immigration impacts women's safety, fiscally and economically, I would say it's still very Labour, but I think culturally I've opened my eyes up to a lot of what's going on in the country, and I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of the public has opened their eyes to a lot of things lately.
What principles were non-negotiable for you?
Equality of opportunity. I thought that's something I will always stand by, is that everyone should have equal opportunities. And it doesn't matter your background, your race, your gender, or the position you were given growing up, you should all be given equal opportunities. And that's something I will always stand by.
Is there a case to be made that you could have stayed and fought to change and improve things within the Labour group and the Labour Party rather than leaving?
I don't think it would have worked. I don't think I would have been able to make the impact that I was wanting to make from within the party.
Do you feel you now have less influence in being able to shape the direction of Peterborough's future by being an independent outside of a group on the council?
Of course, being part of a political party means that you can potentially become a cabinet member, potentially become leader of the council. But I think independent voices are very important, and I think they are I think being independent, you can talk about things what you're not supposed to talk about with being part of a political party, or even raise questions when you're part of a political party. And I think independence could be shaping the way of local politics across the country.
Do you ever see a point where you might return to the Labour Party in the future?
I did have this conversation today with someone. Would I return? Would I be willing to return? After the way I was treated by the Labour Party, I don't think I would feel that it's right to join the party again. But I would be open to have a conversation with Labour about what actually happened. And I think dialogue is so important to uncover so many different things that go on within political parties and how they can improve and how they can change.
Where do you see yourself sitting on the political spectrum?
Central left, I would say. Again, fiscally and economically quite left wing, and culturally potentially to the right of centre. So I would place myself there.
Has your position on that spectrum moved at all in that time you've been an elected politician?
Culturally, I would say, yes, it has changed, because when I was in the Labour Party, I saw so many things go on which opened my eyes to so much trouble, and it actually pushed me towards the right culturally, and that's the only thing where it has changed morally.
Now, a number of listeners have written expressing their concerns over your recent promotion of events championed by Tommy Robinson. Is he somebody that you support politically at all?
He's like a lot of activists and politicians, where you can agree with some things he say, but you don't agree with all of the things he says and promotes and engages in, and he is definitely one of those figures.
Do you think that he's somebody that you should be looking to as someone who has had previous convictions? I think it's 5 stints in prison, former member of the BNP and the EDL.
I wouldn't say I look to him, but he is a good ally to have when it comes to uncovering local politics and trouble that goes on in local politics, because he has the platform to put things like that out there.
So is it his methods are effective, but his actual politics are not where you see yourself?
Yeah, his methods are very effective. I think I heard him on the podcast the other day, and he talked about how he's not against mass immigration, and that all he has a problem with is Islam, which I do not agree with. I think all religions and all cultures should be respected in our country, and especially within Peterborough, because it's multicultural and it's very diverse, and that's a thing I love about Peterborough. But I do agree with his stance that there was Pakistani rape gangs, and that is something that went covered up for years by our authorities, by our local councils, by the police, by people in positions of power. And no one in positions of power should feel as though they're above the law. And Tommy did uncover that. And that is one of those things where I actually agree with what he says. But the rest of it, he's, again, like most people, there's good, there's bad, there's evil in everyone.
What do you see the remaining 3 years of your term holding for you politically? Do you see yourself remaining as an independent, joining another group on the council, potentially creating a new group with the many independents that we now have on the council, or joining a party that doesn't yet have any representation on the council?
I don't think creating another independent political party in Peterborough would work. And I don't see myself joining Peterborough First. Again, I actually think they could have a party whip. They're a registered political party, and by some of the ways they vote on the councils could suggest that they have a party whip. And that's something I would not be willing to get behind again in local politics, is a party whip. But I think my residences are the most important thing about where I stand, or what badge I represent on the council. And I think the only way to truly be able to carry on representing my residents is by being fully independent at the moment.
As you've said, you left the Labour group in part because of bullying. Councillor Farouk stated that he left the Conservative group over toxic culture and bullying. The former Green leader, Councillor Stevenson, stated that she left the Green group over bullying and safeguarding concerns. Does politics in Peterborough need an intervention of sorts? What can be done to make an immediate improvement to the reputation that the council currently has?
I think there is something going on in Peterborough and within the council, and there's certain behaviours and attitudes that go unquestioned or unchallenged, and that needs to change. And how you do that, I don't know.
What do you think the sanction should be for councillors who are found to have broken the code of conduct?
Well, if you break the code of conduct, it could potentially go against the Nolan principles, and they are very important as elected representative to stand by. And I believe if you have broke the code of conduct, you should be very open and transparent with residents about what you've done, and let them ultimately decide whether they think it's enough to make you step down or carry on representing them.
So do you feel there should be some kind of system similar to what MPs have, where if they have received a custodial sentence, then there can be a callback if I think it's 10% of the constituency sign to say that they should be a by-election?
Yeah, that.
Now, we're recording on the day after Councillor Jones resigned as leader of the council following your release of messages that you'd received from him. For any listeners that haven't seen those, I'm going to read through the main ones, censoring the language slightly. Quote, "Oh, so white British cops effing poor white trash in Rotherham is okay, is it? Get an effing grip, Daisy. You're aiming for populist votes and attention. Forgive me, but you're bright enough to know what you were doing, and politically I wish you no luck at all. But you know what you're setting out to do," end quote. When you received that message and first read it, what went through your mind?
I think I was so shocked by it. And I mean, the message was received around a month ago, and I was sat on holiday and thought, oh my gosh, did he just say that to me? And bear in mind, we was having a very civil, a very polite conversation about what I'm up to politically now and my involvement in Women's Safety Initiative. And then came that, and I was just so taken aback by it. I don't even think I responded. I think I just was so shocked, and I still am so shocked about not potentially by, I think I would expect the tone from Councillor Jones, but not there were specific words used in that message which are harmful and are very much victim blaming. And after a while, I think I came to, after the rape gang inquiry came out, which was done by Rupert Lowe independently, and named Peterborough the other day, I thought, I can't sit on this message anymore. It needs to go beyond me.
Now, you decided to share that exchange on X and Facebook. What was the reasoning behind that, rather than going to the council and using the mechanism within the council itself?
I don't think the mechanism within the council always works. And the only way, I thought, I have a decent sized platform to put this out there, and people are going to pick up on it. And the only way to put that out there was on X.
Were you surprised when Councillor Jones took the decision to resign as leader of the council as a result?
No, I think he did the right thing by resigning as leader of the council, but I do question why he didn't resign fully from the council and is sitting as an independent.
When you made the decision to release those messages, was the ultimate objective of that his resignation?
No, I think it was more as a concerned resident in Peterborough, knowing that the leader of the council has said a message like that when there could potentially be victims of grooming in Peterborough, and how could someone go to their local authority, in this case Peterborough, and potentially cover something up if they're using that sort of language to describe victims.
Before you made the decision to post it, did you think this could ultimately be the outcome of posting them?
Yeah, I think I weighed up a lot of things, and I thought, as the human in me feels very guilty for posting those, because I don't think Dennis is a bad person, and I think he was a good leader. But in my opinion, the vulnerable and come first.
What responses, if any, have you received from your fellow councillors?
I haven't received anything from my fellow councillors.
Across the board, so just...
Across the board.
Does that surprise you?
No.
Do you feel quite isolated on the council currently?
Yeah, I feel isolated, of course, but I don't mind that, because I know I'm doing the right thing, and I will keep on calling out things which I think are wrong. And I think over the past few years, no one's questioned the councillors. No one's had the guts to challenge things. And here I am challenging things, and that's caused a lot of isolation. But in all, it doesn't bother me, because deep down, I know that this is the right thing to be doing.
Looking back over the last 48 hours, is there anything that you think you would have done differently?
No.
So would you, if others found themselves in a similar situation, not necessarily messages from the same council, but the councillor, but from other councillors, similar situation, would you encourage them to act in the same way?
I don't think doing what I did, post on X, would probably help, but I would definitely encourage them to go to media, because I definitely think there's some form of problem within Peterborough.
It's only 2.5 months since you backed Councillor Jones in a vote of no confidence led by the Peterborough First, Lib Dem and Green groups. Do you see yourself backing the Labour choice for leader should they put one forward at the extraordinary full council meeting taking place in a week's time?
I don't think I could back a Labour leader in the council again, especially because I know what those are like, what the people are like, and some of the things they've said. And I backed Dennis, and the only time I will say the only time that I will back a Labour administration in the time being with people, with the current councillors that are a part of that administration, the only reason I did that was because my residents did elect me as a Labour councillor, and I felt that that was the right thing to do.
What do you think the council can do to rebuild trust at this moment in time with the public and focus on the residents' priorities after recent events?
I don't think a lot will change while some of the councillors who are on the council are still serving. And it's people like them we as a city need to get rid of and have a completely new council, people who genuinely care about their city and truly want to make a difference for the city, rather than people who are so egoistic and narcissistic and power hungry. And until we get rid of those people, the council's not going to change.
Come election time in 8 months, I guess some of those people that you were talking about may be up for re-election. Do you see yourself being vocal in supporting potential opponents that they might have?
Potentially, of course, but I did say to Alan Dowson, because I think he's a good person, I said, if you would like, if he gets reselected for the local elections, I would be more than willing to support your campaign, because I generally believe he's a good person and actually cares about Flushing and Woodstone. Whereas some of the other councillors, I don't believe actually care about their residents. I think they just care more about their position. And those are the councillors which I would be willing to voice opposition against.
Speaking of those elections in 8 months' time, what's your feeling about where we may end up in terms of the council? As things stand, we haven't had an election since the wave of support for reform nationally has come through. Obviously, support nationally for Labour has crashed. Do you think we're likely to see an even more fragmented council, which means that even more challenges in actually being able to form administration that will be able to push through things such as the budget and any political priorities that they may have?
Yeah, I completely see a very fragmented council come May time, and I do think we could potentially see reform councillors sitting on the council and a decrease in Labour councillors on the council. But that's what happens when the national sway influences local politics. And I think the national sway definitely impacted my election, as Labour were gaining very much momentum in the polls and Conservatives were doing not so great. And I think that's what we're going to see across the country.
Moving on from that, one area that you have become involved with recently is the Women's Safety Initiative. What was it that motivated you to get behind that?
Well, they reached out to me asking, could we take on your petition for CCTV in taxis? And I thought, great, as many people on board, as much support is welcomed. And so I started to get involved, started to campaign, and obviously I did my research into Women's Safety Initiative before I actually agreed to do the petition with them. And I just saw how the statistics they were providing about how immigration impacts women's safety. Okay, yeah, it's something that needs highlighting, but I think we must not take away that honour-based violence and domestic abuse, despite your ethnicity, is still happening in our country, and women's safety should be very important regarding any ethnicity, not just immigration. But I do think it's very important that we highlight how immigration is impacting women's safety.
How does your work with them connect with your role as a councillor?
Well, I think I would see them both as very separate, and I do try to keep them as separate as possible. I do not use my council emails for my involvement in Women's Safety Initiative, and the only connection is the CCTV in taxis campaign, which I think is something that we need in Peterborough, because the statistics showed, I think one of them did a freedom of information, and it highlighted how out of anywhere in Cambridgeshire, taxi drivers are more likely to be subject to abuse in Peterborough. And I thought, well, if that's not a reason to have CCTV, then what is the reason against it? And I mean, there's lots of questions to be asked. What are taxi drivers hiding? What is going on in taxis for them not to want CCTV? And of course, you have to talk about the financial implementation on taxi drivers. But it did say in the reports on the full council that you are able to claim the cost for your CCTV back for your taxes. And so I just still don't see the argument against CCTV in taxis, and that's something I will be campaigning for in my capacity as a councillor, but also as a resident in Peterborough.
Now, the Women's Safety Initiative state in their mission, or that their mission is to, quote, expose the dangers of uncontrolled immigration, put women and children first, advocate for victims and demand real solutions, end quote. Is immigration the number one threat facing women currently?
I think there's lots of threats to women's safety, and I think that what I don't believe in is that people using people's stories and for political gain, and how that we see in all over social media how women are assaulted. We've seen arrests lately about young girls being assaulted by immigrants, and okay, we need to put that to a stop, but I think we also need to highlight all other incidents which are causing risk to women's safety. And I think there was a recent report out from one of the charities, I think it might have been Help or something, which actually highlighted that actually, domestic, we can't just talk about immigration impacting women's safety. We need to keep the conversation about domestic abuse, honour-based violence, and all of those things which are impacting women's safety too. And of course, that is something I'm very passionate about talking to, but we still need to have the conversations about immigration. We need to have the conversations about all of the things impacting women's safety and how to get a solution for all of that, and how women shouldn't have to, because I know so many young females that carry their car keys in their hand, carry their house keys in their hands whilst they're walking down the street. And we shouldn't have to do that. We need to come to a solution where women shouldn't have to put themselves in risks of danger. We shouldn't have to do that.
Is Peterborough a city that you feel safe walking through?
It definitely was once a time. When I was young, I grew up in New England, and I would go out until late at night, walking down the streets, playing football in the local park. But now I feel less safe now as a 19-year-old than I did as a 10-year-old walking down the street in Peterborough.
Now, the voting age is set to be lowered to 16 within this Parliament. What impact do you think that this will have on British politics and policy making?
I think it can go either way. I think we will see Labour use it to their advantage, or we'll see a lot of young people change their perspective, because we all know that young people tend to be more Labour leaning, but I think over time we might see that change. With especially Reform has such a great social media presence, and they're absolutely nailing that, and I think a lot of young people are engaged in that. But I think we need to have a real conversation about what politics is and what ideologies are, and I don't think lowering the voting age to 16 is a good thing until you have mandatory politics lessons within school.
Would you encourage 16-year-olds to get involved when it does happen?
Yes, definitely. And because it is going to happen, I encourage all 16-year-olds who are going to go out to vote to have some form of understanding about who they're voting for and what are the implementations of voting for them.
What do you think that more experienced councillors can learn from you?
Definitely got it on the social media. That's one thing I've nailed. But I also think that I understand what young people want and need, and for what young people need is to have a position on the table, to have a voice on the table. And I don't think we've seen that. And I think a lot of older councillors need to actually be out there asking young people what do you want? What do you want to see? How can we represent you? And I think there was Warrington Fields was a very interesting one, because I did ask a question in a meeting. I think it was a children education meeting, and I said, well, have you asked young people what they want? And because as far as I'm aware, they've been out asking residents about their views on a fence going around the field. And I asked the councillor, and they said, no, we haven't asked young people what they want. I said, well, you should be asking these school-age children, do they want to be safeguarded or not? And that's something I think I can bring to the council and get older councillors to start doing, is asking young people what they want.
How would you encourage other councillors to get young people more engaged? Is it by direct action going to them, or is there a way of bringing them to the council in such a way?
I mean, you have things like the youth council, which are great, but I don't think you actually, I mean, I sat on the youth council, I don't think you actually see the inner workings of politics. I think you attend a scrutiny committee every now and then, but that's not enough. I think to get young people involved in politics, they need a far greater understanding of what's going on in local politics. But I think the only way, but that's never going to happen, and the only way to actually get young people involved and engaged in politics is by asking them what they want and representing them, because we've seen nationally young people be forgotten about. And well, a lot of people might now change their manifestos and their campaigns towards young people since the voting age has been lowered.
Do you believe in a free press?
That's a very difficult, to an extent, yes.
So do you want to expand on that? What parts of the free press do you have an issue with, or just the press in general?
I think it's I've handed my TV license in because I don't believe a lot of the things that the BBC say. And I think that some people will be extreme because it will get them somewhere, or they'll make a story out of it. But I think it's a very difficult question, actually.
As someone with kidney disease, how disability friendly do you find Peterborough to be?
I think Peterborough is very disability friendly in specific ways, but I think they need more accessibility to toilets in the city centre. And I know a lot of people across Peterborough have been asking for more toilet facilities in Peterborough city centre. And as someone who struggles with incontinence, that's something that would help me when I'm wandering around Peterborough centre.
Now, as always, we'd like to finish the podcast with some quick fire questions. Which people in politics inspire you?
Definitely was inspired by Dennis Skinner when I was growing up, and he really showed me, well, when I used to watch his videos and listen to him in Parliament, that speak up, you're doing the right thing, speak up.
Now, you've said previously that one potential route for you in the future is to be an MP. If you had the choice of any government role, what would it be?
Foreign affairs.
What's your favourite food?
Salmon.
Any particular dish, or just with everything?
Oh no, salmon and lime and coriander rice with sweet chilli sauce.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Lots of advice, which you expect being young in politics. But I received advice recently, don't argue with donkeys. And that's something I've been taking on board. And there's a whole phrase about the saying, don't argue with donkeys. But I definitely advise lots of people to read that and take it on board.
What's your favourite book?
The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell.
What's your favourite spot in the city?
Ooh. If I'm going for food, I do like the Argo Lounge, but I also do like I used to spend a lot of summers reading on the Cathedral Square, and I think there's lots of places across the city which I would consider places which I visit frequently and do activities. And lately, my favourite spot has been the Palmerston Arms, since I can drink.
Finally, what gives you hope on a difficult day?
My dog. I've had him, well, he's 9 months old, and I've had him for 4 months, and he is a small miniature dachshund. Yeah, not that he can protect me much, but he likes to think so.
Councillor Daisy Blakemore-Creedon, thank you for joining me on the Politics of Peterborough.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to Daisy for joining me. You can follow her on X at Daisy Blakemore and on Facebook at Councillor Daisy Blakemore-Creedon. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so that you get each episode as soon as it's released. You can find me on X and Facebook at PoliticsPBORO. Please let me know what you thought of the episode. If you have any suggestions as to who you'd like to hear on the show, or any questions you'd like to put to our guests, you can email me at politics.peterborough@hotmail.com. This episode of The Politics of Peterborough was created, hosted, recorded and edited by me. We'll see you next time.